This is the Mabbott family grave. This is in Sher, and I'm not exactly sure. That may be his wife, I believe. I don't really know that, but this here says, hang on a minute, Elizabeth Mabbott, and at the top, as it pans upward, there's William Mabbott, and that was Llewellyn Mabbott's father. He died in 1892, as you can see. Very, very old stones. Got a lot of growth on them, but anyways, that is the family plot of the Mabbotts. And let me bring Mr. Griffey on. How you doing, sir?
Doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing outstanding, man. And I'm very happy that you can be on my show this evening.
Well, thank you.
If you could tell people about yourself for a little bit, maybe explain who you are and.
Okay. Well, I was born in Kokomo, Indiana, and at the age of 6, our family moved to Delphi. So I've basically been a resident of Delphi most of the years since then. And I was a photographer there. Also had the newspaper, the journal there for 7 years from 1889 to 1992.
Yeah.
And got involved, after I got out of the Army, I got involved with the Amer Green story. And a friend of mine, Charles Gerard, and I, we started doing all the research. And that was basically our first book that we published of a few that we've done now. But
a few? Oh, I didn't know that there was a few.
Well, the one about Amer Green, we only had the one.
Yeah.
Together. And then unfortunately he died of ALS, and then I did the updated version 2 years ago.
Yeah, and I bought that. I read it twice, and I left it at a friend's house. He lost the house, and guess what? I lost the book. I'll have to rebuy it. But I did read it twice, sir. It was fantastically done. I want to point that out.
Well, thank you.
Well, now, you know, I put on the thumbnail that this was Delphi's other unsolved murder, and in a way it is. He was never convicted. So we don't really know for a fact whether those remains were those of Llewellyn Mabbott or not. And that is something that I would like clarified.
Yes, I mean, that is the real question of the whole mystery, is if somebody like ID Channel or somebody, one of the big boys, could get in contact with people and actually get permission to exhume that body, then they could tell us whether it was in fact her, because there was an argument. The dentist said it wasn't. The body, the other one said it wasn't, and it was just skeletal remains when they found it. So, you know, I mean, without the body being definitely identified by today's standards,
yeah,
we really don't know if that was Noelle or somebody else, because her father, up to the time after even the lynching, he never believed that that was really his daughter. So, you know, he always had questions in his own mind about whether his daughter was alive or dead.
Yeah, and well, you know what? I will leave that for a friend of mine to call in here with in a bit. But she did have a very interesting question regarding that. You know, concerning the remains. And, you know, I'll wait for the call-in time, and she can call in and ask you that.
Okay.
Man, you know what? I really should have kind of studied up here on some questions, because I know the books, but it's more like to the questions. Amer Green lived in Young America, and that's straight north of me. And I think it's only a few miles north of where I live right here. I live just east of Burlington on
Right.
Highway 22. Now, the house that he lived in is still there.
Correct. And I know some people have misidentified it by the pictures, and they thought
That
it was
would
a
be
different
me.
house in Young America, but it is as you are entering uh, Young America from the west, going east. It is the first brick home on your right as you enter Young America.
Yeah.
And I know that the gentleman who had bought it when we were doing the research, he was very cooperative with us as far as taking photographs and allowing us to publish it and everything else because he had restored the house really beautifully at that time.
You know what? I've seen it, and that was after you had told me that, and I looked at from the highway, and he really did. He did do
He
a
was
good.
a history teacher. He was a history teacher.
The
I
what?
think, I think he was a history teacher at maybe at Katt or Carroll, one of the two schools. He was a history teacher. The guy who
Oh, well, you know what, man? Being a history teacher and owning Amer Green's house, that's kind of a double luxury.
right, right. But no, and yeah, it was. But if you look at the map, where the maps lived and where Amer Green lived, it really wasn't a stretch to get there. I mean, it was like Young American to 29 over to the road and down, and then it was right to the Mabbits. I mean, it's really not a long drive, even over the horse and buggy.
Yeah, with the horse and buggy, man, my dad takes further rides than that on a horse just for fun. Yeah,
Right.
it wasn't that far away, but I kind of question a little bit. But I mean, now this is if now it was his brother that lived there in Young America after he was released, right?
Correct.
Now he's the one that stated that Amer had told him that they went to Indianapolis. There was a botched abortion. She was dying. She died, and
Now
he
that was
buried the body.
you're thinking of his sister. That was one of Llewellyn's sisters that happened. That they after all of this lynching and everything else, then one of Llewellyn's sisters and her two brothers went to Indianapolis. She had an abortion, and then she come home without a baby. So, or the baby was born and whatever, but they were charged with killing the baby, and that was a huge trial.
Hang on one second.
That was
Because,
Llewellyn's sister.
because I found this back in here just the other day, where he was talking about that because he told it to the barber in Galveston.
Correct, but it wasn't about them going to Indianapolis. His brother, that she had died, but it wasn't in Indianapolis. It was like they had gone to Kokomo. I mean, it was somewhere in the region
Okay.
because supposedly they found the bloody clothes over by Lynching County. Do you remember the name of the little town there or whatever? They found some.
In Miami County?
Was it Miami? It was, Tipton County.
Okay, yeah, Tipton. Got you. Yeah. That's a little south of us here.
Right.
Um, Man, I was trying to find that because I just read it the other day. Because the barber had asked him, now this is after he had served his time and he was an older gentleman, about what happened to Luella Mabbitt. And he says, well, all I know is what my brother had told me, that
Right.
she was pregnant, tried to get an abortion, did, it was botched, she died, and he buried her. Now, I read that out of the book, but then again, I mean, you wrote the book, so I'm talking to.
Well, I mean, the thing is, that, yeah, that is what a barber told us, you know, the Bill said. Now, you know, Barber was a very old man when he told us the story because obviously, I mean, all this happened in the 1880s, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think. Go ahead.
So we were doing the research, you know, almost 100 years later.
Exactly. I mean, if
So,
you think about when the book was released, when did you start on that? Late 60s?
oh no, I got out of the military in 1972, and it was around 1973.
Okay. I got you. Well, it was just after 100 years then. Yeah, you know what? He is lagging, and it's international, and at times I'm going to have to ask him to repeat himself, because you don't want to miss any of this. This is, to me, I mean, it is, again, and simply because of the lynching makes it unsolved, because he wasn't convicted, nor did anything ever come out from him on it, aside of what maybe his brother said. But
Yeah, up to the moment of his lynching, though, he still claimed that she was alive.
yeah. Now, what was the name of the man? Payne.
Okay, yes, that Luella Mabbitt he had left her in Fort Worth with this man named Samuel Payne, and then of course the newspapers went down to find out about, okay, is there such a person there? And they had left shortly after arrested. They had left supposedly because Payne was in ill health, but the neighbor said that the lady's name was Luella, but she claimed her last name was Merritt, not Mabbitt.
Coincidence? I don't know.
See, this is the thing. I mean, there's just so many coincidences here. And this Samuel Payne was somebody that Amer knew from Chicago, and supposedly he went back to Chicago. But when I was down working at Baylor University taking photographs one time, I met this lady who was the wife of a judge, and she was involved in the Historical Society. And so she started looking up for me. And yes, there was a Samuel Payne, living in Dallas or Fort Worth at the time, and all that. So I mean, it just brought more questions than answers.
Yeah, and you know what? The whole of this is more questions than answers. I mean, we got the answers on what happened, but we don't know the answers on the goods totally.
The key to the whole thing the remains. That's the key to the whole thing. I mean, if they would examine the remains and it was Luella,
Okay, close. Yeah.
If they're not her,
then it's unsolved. Now, you know what? I've been talking to some people about how to get that done, because it seems like since he was lynched and there was never a trial of due process, that it is an unsolved murder because he was not convicted. Now, it seems that the money could be put together by the ID channel to exhume the remains to see if they were Mabbitt or not. And if they are not Mabbitt, that still leaves it an unsolved murder in a way. And now I'm not saying if those aren't her remains that he didn't bury her likewise, but we'll never know that. We'll never know the place.
Correct. That's the thing. I mean, it'd be nice to know though. I mean, if it was her remains, it's off right there.
Exactly. Yeah. And if so, guess what? They lynched a guilty man.
Correct. That's the thing. So, it's just, but that's why, I mean, all the different things that Charles and I did over the years, trips we took, trips we took to Ohio, trying to find his grave the first time. I mean, we didn't find his grave until Find a Grave came along, and we got lucky and found that. You know, but I mean, he said that he wanted to be buried by the side of his sister in Hebron, Ohio. So Charles and I drove over to Hebron, Ohio, to the cemetery, and it was a lot of stones that were just completely erased from the age and everything else. But we couldn't get the records of the burial plots. So we just more or less gave up. But then along comes the Find a Grave program, and it is close to Hebron, but it's not Hebron, where he was buried. And then, of course, instead of putting his real name, Amer Green, they put Abner Green on the stone. But the date is correct. The date is correct. Everything is correct except his birth date is correct. His death is correct. It's just that they put that B in there because they did not want anybody locating it and possibly trying to dig up his grave or whatever.
Now that right there is the stone of Abner Green.
Right.
And that is the death date right there. And that is where we believe that he's buried at. Now, this here is the lynching. Save it to say he looks a little guilty there, but it's probably the rope.
The thing about that picture, if you go back to that picture for a second, the thing about that photograph, as a photographer, it was taken by A.W. Williver, who was the mayor of Delphi, but he was also the photographer for Delphi. And we always were amazed that he actually took the time to get that cat or dog underneath his feet. I mean, it's kind of an added creepiness, to the photograph by putting that animal there below him.
You know what? I always assumed that it was a dog.
Right. It looks like a dog, but
Yeah, if he put that under there for creepiness, right on. Because people ask me about that, like, well, what's the dog doing in there for? I'm like, I don't know, man. It's probably just sniffing around,
Sometimes they took some pictures which were pretty interesting.
So, I had the other one, and let me find that real quick here because it should be in my photos.
Okay.
Down here, and I thought it was Amer 1, and I could be sadly mistaken. In fact, it may not have saved. Yeah, and I don't know what is up with my PC. It is not functioning properly. Every time I upgrade, crap goes wrong with it. It is what it is. Now, this here is William Mabbitt right here. Let me kind of show people. This is her father right here. Now, that's the picture, and that's the only picture I've seen of him. But that is William Mabbitt, her father.
Right.
And again, Amer. So, what is it like? What's the best question that you have on this? I mean, what intrigues you the most concerning?
Whatever happened to Llewellyn?
One
I
more
mean,
time. Do what?
if that's not her in the grave, what happened to her?
Yeah. Well, you know what? That's the exact same place my mind is as well. If it is her, all's good. If it isn't, he probably put her elsewhere. Where she wouldn't have been found, because it would be hard to figure that a guy that loved a woman would just throw her in a creek.
Right.
You know, but at the same time,
But if she happened to be the Luella that was in Fort Worth, then where did she go?
well, yeah, and you know what? I mean that does add to the story, because there was a Luella, and what was the last name?
Merritt.
Merritt,
She was saying. Yeah, she
and
remembered the name of Merritt.
that just seems kind of unlikely. And if he just said that, but it was real, but she was going by that, then yeah, but it makes you wonder, but why, maybe she did run off with him.
Well, see, the whole premise that Amer gave was that he helped her get away from her parents. And supposedly she wanted to get away from her parents, and it was something that they had planned. And that he just helped her get away from her parents. Now, whether or not that's the way it was,
Now,
we have no idea.
Mr. Mabbott had something to say about that, did he not? Didn't he?
Like I
Like, what
he
did he
didn't he
mean?
didn't think it was her. He didn't think it was her. I mean, you know, uh, just like in the interview when Mabbott went to the jail to talk to Amer, and he said, "Well, we always treated her nice and everything," and Amer said, "That's not what she tells me," which that just brought the next question up. Okay, what is he saying? Okay, that's not what she tells me. Is she still alive?
Well, you know what? You'll find out when the time's right. Well, when they put a rope around your neck and say the time's right, that's
Right.
when you should start talking.
Well, he did talk, but it didn't seem to do any good because right when he was talking about it, and then that's when the horses went and it was over.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? Now, do you know who put his hat back on him?
Nope.
I know that they did, but
Yeah.
somebody climbed up there to put his hat back on him. I thought that was maybe that was creepy too, Maybe
Yeah.
that's the way they wanted. Oh, and put a cat under there. It's October.
Right. Halloween's coming.
Might as well. Oh, you know what? Now, where they hung him at was a one-room schoolhouse, or at a one-room schoolhouse, correct?
It was near one, yes.
And they stopped teaching there because they said that it was haunted.
Correct.
And they ended up selling that property.
Right.
Now, I know the people who owned it, or I should say I know of them. Actually, my father knows them very well. But they had owned it since at least 1900.
Okay.
So they bought it not long after that, being within that 30 years. In fact, that family still owns that land. They're a big farmer. Yeah, you probably know who I'm talking about, I think.
Yeah.
One more time?
Huh?
I didn't hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure right now.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I know the name, but I just assumed you may know. I mean, you're more familiar with that area.
Right.
Okay. Well, let's go to call-ins here, and I'm going to add this twice. Once there, and the little ticker across the bottom. That's where you can call in. That's when you. That's right there. That's where you can talk to Mr. Griffey. You can ask him your questions upon this case. And remember, it is this case only.
Correct.
So let's don't deviate. Let's don't be those people. Well, let me, because now I got to put my mind into it. And really, I was trying to find like more pictures than anything. Oh, hey, we got a call. Hold tight here. Hello?
Hi, how are
Hey.
you?
Hey, how are you, Miss Cavalier?
Very good.
Ah, outstanding. Did you know you're on live?
I can be on live.
Okay.
I have some questions.
All right.
Mr. Griffey, explain to me, I have not read your book. I have it on the way. But after they found the remains of Luella, the dentist in town took it to the Dental Association meeting up in Indianapolis. And I found the minutes from that and the discussion, and they asked several questions. The dentist did not believe. Well, the dentist took the lower jaw only. Let's put it that way, from what I read in the Dental Association minutes. And the dentist asked several questions. The most interesting, I thought, was they wanted to know if Luella had chewed tobacco.
Correct.
The tobacco, the teeth in the lower jaw were stained with tobacco. Do you know anything about that?
I remember that was one of the arguments by the dentist that it wasn't her because they were saying that it was a male tobacco chewer,
Yeah, around the age, they estimated that he was in his 50s.
Correct.
Now, I have a question. There were 4 dentists that came to that conclusion, and it's kind of surprising that all 4 of them had the same questions, same concerns. They identified the jaw as being a male. Do you know how? I didn't get that. The difference between a female and a male jaw?
I'm not versed enough in the anatomy, to know what the difference would be. How you would age teeth or know whether it's tobacco stains on them or whatever. I mean, I really don't know. But being skeletal remains, you would think that they would know whether it was a male or female by the pelvic area.
Well, that's what I thought, but apparently he didn't take the pelvis up there to Indianapolis. I was curious about how do you plan to start the process to identify those remains?
There's no way that I would have any way of doing it. I mean, somebody powerful like ID Channel, they could get it done. I mean, they have the money, the influence, that they could get it done probably. But a private individual, really very unlikely.
Well, during the time that you wrote the book, did you talk to her family at all?
Yes, we did talk to some of her family, the ones that would talk to us.
Now, is there anyone that had any documents from that time period?
Gee, I would have to see what Charles got. Charles Gerard had the contact with Minnie Mabbitt, or not Minnie. I forget what the lady's name was. It was an elderly Abbott lady that was, or Mabbitt lady that was the descendant. It was one of the granddaughters of the Mabbitts, and I don't know if he got any documents or anything from her, because he was the one that was handling the interview with that lady. The people who were living on the Mabbitt homestead who would not allow us to even take a picture of the they were very rude. Did not want us anywhere near the property.
Man, that's like a shame.
You know, a lot of families from that era, when scandals or whatever happened in their families, oftentimes destroyed everything that reminded them of it or that anybody could ever refer back to. But sometimes you get a family member that's the opposite, and they collect and save. And, you know, every once in a while you can get, you can find in an old trunk, in an old attic, buried in a wall, you know, buried in the basement underneath 6 feet of dirt, a trunk that has all of it in it.
Right.
And I just wondered if you had run across anything like that in your research. And I'll tell you why. I have read several of the news articles, you know, from the New York Times and the Indianapolis papers, and certainly the Delphi paper, of, you know, the reporter's interpretation of what happened. And there's one that sticks out with a big conflict about how Amer Green was captured. And I'm wondering if you can share that story with us.
Me? Yes.
Her.
Oh, yeah. She's there, aren't you? Miss Cavalier?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, she's there.
Yeah, I was just right at the very end. Okay, we were talking about whether people had found stuff in trunks or whatever. The only things that I've heard about being recovered and saved were like pieces of the rope. A lot of guys that were out there got pieces of the rope. The lock and the keys, I think, to the jail may still be at the museum.
Oh, wow.
The one where they broke the lock or whatever, that was in the museum at one time. The tree, people carved off pieces of it for souvenirs. I mean, but they were mainly old people. I mean, I can remember, say, 30 years ago, yeah, there were still people alive that would tell me, "Oh yeah, my father gave me this piece of the rope," or something like that. You know, and they were old men at that time. But you know, I mean, there were souvenirs, but as far as things that actually came from the Mabbitt family, I really haven't heard of anything. You know, I mean,
Now,
after Amer was lynched, the family had a lot of misfortune. And like you were saying, you know, I mean, a lot of times it destroys a family. It basically destroyed Mr. Mabbott after all that happened after that, because his one son was struck by lightning dead. Then his daughter went to Indianapolis with the two brothers and came back without a baby, and the baby was found in a boot in the river. And so they charged them with murder. I mean, they had the murder trial. They didn't find him guilty, but they had the murder trial. I mean, all that poor old Mr. Mabbott went through after that lynching. I mean, he was broken. I mean, it broke the whole family. It destroyed the family.
Well, my next question might be, are there any photographs? I can only find the one photograph of Amer Green hanging. I couldn't find any while he was alive to see what he looked like. Were you able to locate any of his photographs when he was living?
Not actual photographs, just the carving that they had in the newspaper. The wood carving.
I have that right here.
Yeah. I was going to say, yeah, I think you have that.
Another question. If you would ask him about, like, at the lynching concerning, because there was the whole thing that his brother had said that, and I can't find it in here, that she had died after an abortion.
That's in the big edition. That's the one where it has all the newspaper articles.
Exactly. Well, now, and I guess if you don't mind me asking, well, when they put him up there and was going to hang him, I believe his words were like, "You came to hang me, and that's what you're going to do, regardless of what I say."
Yeah, more or less.
Now, if that was his words, I mean, could it not be true that because of the circumstances that got him there, if in fact that was the circumstances that got him there, that he may have felt very, how do I want to phrase it? Like he had that coming for what had happened at that time.
I think he just knew. I mean, he knew what they were going to do. I don't think it was a thing of guilt on his part or anything. I think it was just he knew that that's what was going to happen.
Well, he knew that's what was going to happen. I'll give you that. That many men don't come and break you out of jail and, hey, put a rope around your neck without the thought, this is going to happen. But I just wonder if deep down, especially given 1869, that he might not have felt that, well, I did cause this. We weren't married. We got the abortion. She died. And maybe in a way, this is God's payback to me. Maybe that was his, maybe that was kind of his thought at the time.
I don't know. I have always thought that it would be nice if the had Amer, if they kept him instead of giving him back to his mother, because they list what he had on him. What he had the one new, some receipts, and all that, and but it would have been nice if they would have kept him as evidence or something rather than giving him back to the mother. But of course, once she got him, that's probably the end of him too.
Now, I called the Carroll County Courthouse today to see if there was any documents that remained at all. And the lady's like, well, look, in a case that old, maybe somewhere, but we're not going to go dig through them. But if you want to come over here and go through all our 1800 records, you can go through those books. I said, you know what? I'd have a field day doing that, because that'd be like looking through history. That'd just be so cool to do anyway.
Yeah, well, that's what Charles and I ended up doing with a lot of it was we had to do a lot of digging, and the thing is, what's interesting is that the way it all started as far as us was that I had my photographic studio in a building owned by Howard Bradshaw. And one day, Howard came over and he said, he said, I got over 1,000 negatives that belong to Willow. Glass.
Could you repeat that? Belong to who?
Howard Bradshaw.
Oh, got you. Okay. Yeah, you
Right.
broke up real bad there.
Okay. So anyway, and he wanted to know if we would want to print them. And so, of course, we were excited about that. And we went down and we got the glass negatives out of his basement. And there were over 2,500. So we started printing each one of these glass negatives, printing the photographs. And that's when we came across the one of the lynching. And then we saw the one of the lynching and we said, wait a minute, we got to know more about what's going on here. Because it was the only recorded lynching in the history of Carroll County. And that's when we started getting newspaper archives and really started digging into it. But it was all photographs for the gas negatives.
Wow. Go ahead, Miss Cavalier.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm curious about Luella's side of the family. Now, am I right in that she was a twin?
Yes.
Okay, now, was it her twin sister that was involved with William Walker?
Yes.
Okay, and did they get married? Did they wind up married, or were they just kind of, what's the old term for it, courting?
Oh, I would have to look up to be positive, but I believe actually did get married. And that then she had nothing to do with her family anymore. I think that pretty much broke up the relationship between her and the family because, of course, they had accused William Walker of aiding Amer in the disappearance of Luella. So,
but he served jail time up in what, Michigan City or Cass? Somewhere after that?
he was in Carroll County, I know that, but then they let him out after the lynching because the sheriff actually hid him up in the cupola of the old jail to keep him protected when they came in to get Amer.
Well, maybe you can explain, and some of this is clear and some of it's not. But what happened between the sheriff of Carroll County and the governor of the state of Indiana?
Okay, well, the governor of Indiana was very disparaging to the sheriff of Carroll County for not protecting his prisoner. And so the sheriff, of course, he fired back, and the newspaper editor of Delphi Journal, he really fired back. I mean, he really went after the governor, but it was more or less a political thing because the governor was a Democrat and the sheriff was Republican, and the Delphi Journal newspaper was Republican. We had always attempted to get a hold of copies of Delphi Citizen of the whole incident. We get a different review because that was the Democrat paper. And we never, ever could find, there were missing copies at the certain dates that we really needed to be able to see the other side, how it was being presented on the other side of the political aisle.
So there was a lot of Democrat versus Republican politics going on the whole time.
As far as the newspaper, yes.
Now, isn't it true that in part of that, because the governor had posted National Guard at Cass County,
Correct.
he did not do that at Carroll County, and
well, the sheriff of Carroll County acted like he didn't need any help. He could handle it himself.
Aye.
And that was why the governor was criticizing him. He had put the guards around Cass County to protect him.
Well, and I don't know about then as today, but Logansport's quite a bit larger than Delphi by a long minute. You know?
Right. But Carroll County was where the temperature was really high as far as Amer Green.
Well, you know what? They did have the mob up there at Cass County because he asked the sheriff if he could have a gun for protection, and the sheriff's like, "Yeah, I don't think so."
Right.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to hand you a gun, Mr. Green.
Katt County was a lot more able to protect prisoners than Carroll County.
You know what? And allow me to find it, but keep talking because I want to show people the old Carroll County Jail, and there is that photo in here. Should be right here. That's the courthouse. Right here. And let me see if I can get that up there where people can see it without the glare. That was the jail right there at that time. With that right there being the cupola, I would imagine, or right. This over here. Yeah. Now,
because the
jail is bigger than what we have today, and I know I've been in there a few times.
Yeah. Well, the sheriff, he took Will Walker, his wife, and his daughter, had them go up to the cupola for protection. Because
now, go ahead.
The mob wanted Will Walker too, but you know.
You know what? Speaking of, and who is it that I'm thinking of that killed Amos Brumball? That was his brother.
That was his brother. That was in Katt County.
Now, you know what? He's buried. Amos Brumball's buried right there in Young America.
I never see that. But yeah, that's where he was killed.
Yeah, right. Well, they didn't take. Well, they took Amer Green all the way to Ohio. You know, that that could have been a smelly trip.
They didn't want him anywhere around Indiana.
You know, you see, and I mean, like, I get that from back then. I do, but it just seems like today, I mean, there would be so many question marks on that I don't know. I mean, without due process, you know, I mean, how do you know? I mean, these people acted pretty much in the know, and they may have been or thought that they was in the know, but was they? You know, I mean, that's the unanswered question.
Right. Well, I mean, you know.
Well, I have a question. If I'll talk a little slow and very clear. After Amer Green was lynched, the prosecutor brought charges against the people who supposedly were there. How was it that the reporter who took the picture, who wrote the story, didn't remember or point fingers at anybody? He just said, I wasn't there.
That's one of the points. That's one of the points that I bring up in my book. That it's just
buy the book.
I mean, if you read the story, the newspaper reporter said, there he was, Mr. Mabbitt, and Amer Green side by side, and them talking together. But yet, when it came to the grand jury, oh, nobody knew anybody there.
So did they get past the grand jury?
The thing is that or even the newspaper editor said he didn't recognize anybody there, even though he wrote in the newspaper that he saw Mr. Mabbitt there.
Yeah. And Mr. Mabbitt says, I wasn't there.
Yep.
Okay, there was a doctor that it was a very small paragraph in the Library of Congress, and they identified a doctor. It started with an L, and I can't locate the article again. But was there a doctor who was kind of in charge of the lynch mob that went after Amer Green?
Well, I can't think of any doctor. Oh, Leonard Squire, but that was the coroner.
Now
Squire Leonard.
He was from Florida, was he not?
He was from Florida, I believe.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Now, because they called the coroner's office to ask the same, and now I forget what it was, exactly what they said. Man, you know what? It wasn't all that long ago, but I was making a lot of calls today. I assure you, I've been on the phone all day. Go ahead, Miss Cavalier. You're doing this show fantastic.
Well,
you're asking better questions than I.
If there was politics involved, why didn't the governor send somebody down to investigate it?
I can't guess why anything that happened, because I mean, it was such a sham. It was such a joke. The whole thing was such a joke. The only person that actually had any intelligent words to say was Judge Gold, and that was because he was telling them that, look, you really ought to come back and say, if somebody did something wrong. But of course, the grand jury wouldn't. I mean, Carolina is a small county, and everybody knows everybody, and probably nobody might, be fun to put Mr. Mabbitt in jail.
Well, did you ever discover when they brought Amer Green down and they got him in court the first day, and he was standing there, what was the problem with the indictment?
They didn't have proof that the body was hurt because of the difference of opinion of the dentist and the medical doctor.
You know what? I would like to let you know that if you remember Anthony Greeno.
You talking to me?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's here. He is True Crime Investigates. He may have a question or so. Now, I do want to point out that he did not read your book.
Well, shame on him.
But he heard it all from me, and he does know from that.
Right.
I told him, I said, read the book. I will. I'm going to read the book.
Hey, Greeno, shame on you.
And there it is. You heard it. So,
you,
he may call in, and he may have a question.
Well,
in fact, he may have a lot of questions.
Disconnect.
Do what?
If anybody calls in, I will disconnect.
Well,
my next question is, who were the attorneys? Who was the attorney that defended Amer Green?
There was one that was Dykeman. See, who was the other one? There were two attorneys. He had two attorneys.
And who was the prosecutor that was crazy enough to take it to grand jury? Or bold enough, I should say. Not crazy.
Yeah. Let's see. Sheriff.
See, he's got his notes right there. Totally prepped.
Yeah, sure. Okay, one of them was McConnell, Stuart McConnell. That was his active attorney. The other one was David Dykeman. Dykeman was from Chicago. It doesn't really say where he was from at the time, but Dykeman had been representing him since the time he'd been in the penitentiary up in Indiana, up in Michigan City.
Well, this is a very interesting case. And how are there any Mavets left in the area?
There are Mavets per se. I mean, their name is Mavet right now, but there are still some Mavets in the area.
Oh, that's right. That is exactly right. You know what? Anthony Greeno is related to the Mavets.
Okay.
Oh, wow. I don't think I realized that.
Well, I knew that for a couple years when he told me. In fact, allow me to go into a quick story. When I was first telling him about this, and this is before we contact, there he is. He's back. Hang on. International internet.
Yeah, I lost you there for a minute.
When I was telling him about the story up front, and I didn't have the book or anything with me, but I was telling him about it. He's like, you know what? No. It's better that he relates that story to you rather than me. So I'll wait for him to call, okay? But I'll let him tell you how he's related, because one of them came and picked him up that day.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Miss Cavalier.
Mr. Griffey, what was the reaction from your book when, in fact, both books, in the community when you wrote it?
Okay, what was the what?
What was the reaction to the books, both when you wrote them, when they were done?
Generally, the first one was, I mean, there were people who were not that thrilled about it. Generally, over in the Flora area and the area, the Mabbit area, they weren't as excited about it as people in the rest of the county. I mean, there's a lot in it, but the only people that were really negative seemed to be the man living in the house. That was it.
Well, I think that it was probably a pretty serious matter when it happened. And now, people either think it was humorous or it was a tragedy. And I'm wondering if those remains were ever exhumed, if the prosecutor would be willing to close the coldest case in Indiana.
Wow.
Well, I mean, if the remains were exhumed and they proved that it was Luella Mabbit, I would think that it would be required that they close it.
the only problem is, I think, wouldn't they have to have a relative at this point to compare the DNA?
Yes, they would.
Now, you know what?
But immediately they should be able to identify whether it was a male or a female.
Yeah, very, very true. But, you know, I do want to point out CC Moore with the familial DNA. I think that she could break that down to a family line. Now, I mean, I realize that that would cost even more money, but it does seem like that they could find the family to which she belonged to.
If it wasn't her.
Well, if it wasn't her, then that would show as well.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry, I don't know what I was thinking. Has anyone approached the ID channel, or I would think that this would make a very good television documentary.
Yeah, on the ID channel.
On the ID channel, or Oxygen.
Yeah, I just hope that Anthony said that the family would be willing to do the DNA. So
I'll bet if there were enough of them left, that somebody would step forward. Probably that had an interest in tracing their genealogy. And finally, after 100 plus years, 150 years, to put the matter to rest.
right.
And it might just be a fun phone call to call the prosecutor there in Delphi, Carroll County, and ask him if he'd be interested in it. I'll bet he'd just jump on it.
You know what? I'll call him. Mark my words. I done called him once today, and he's supposed to give me a call back, so let that phone ring. It'd be cool if he called in right now, wouldn't it?
It would be.
Go, yeah? Hello, prosecutor?
Katt, I was being real sarcastic when I said that.
Well, you know what? I mean, like it does. I was telling you earlier. I called the prosecutor today, and he is supposed to give me a call back.
Well, put that in your book to ask him if he's willing to close the coldest case in Indiana.
Well, you know what? I mean, does there not need to be answers first? I mean, you can't really close it without those questions being answered.
Exactly.
And that is where you get the whole thing for the ID channel. You know, because this is a very cold case. This is very old. There's only one solution to it, and that is to exhume the remains and test to see if that was her remains. If it was not, then it could be looked at differently. Maybe.
Griffey, did you ever go to the prosecutor's office to ask if they had any of the files?
Not to the prosecutor's office. We went to the courthouse. And I believe at that time, they were more or less like what they were saying with him, that these records were probably in the basement. And
the basement, see?
Yeah, well, that's where they used to store a lot of stuff, you know.
Yeah, well, she was telling me about one too, where she had to go through the basement. I called about Shock Lake and how it got named. Oh, that's a long time ago. You'll need to go through our basement. It seems like their go-to, you know. We got a big basement. You might need to look through it.
Yeah. You better bring a mask.
Yeah. What?
How many basements did you go to, Mr. Griffey?
A lot.
Michael, maybe you can repeat that.
She wanted to know how many basements that you had went through.
I said a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Now, you know what? This kind of brings something to my mind, and I don't know that it would have any bearing at all. But what about the Cass County courthouse? Would they have anything? I mean, mind you, it's a Carroll County case, but they did hold him for a while.
Well, all they would probably have would be the records of when he was actually a prisoner there.
I see.
They were refusing to release him unless Carroll County paid the fees for them holding him and all that.
See, he's got a good memory, though.
Yeah.
Or Michigan City, you see.
Yeah.
Yeah, same way. Because it would be nice to find something, and you know what? I have the time that, look, man, I could dig through like old stuff all day long. You know, I mean, it would just be a good time doing it.
Right. Well, anymore, as far as I'm concerned, you know, I personally, I've been the winner completely out of the state, and then when I go up for medical tests and everything else because I do that once a year, and so I don't really have a lot of time to do any more research as far as that goes.
I would be happy to do that in your favor, sir.
But like I said, it's just the other thing about the remains and your guest on there, your phone caller may remember something about this, but supposedly the head disappeared. And they were talking about the dentist said the teeth were so, and then supposedly the head disappeared. So that was just another weird thing about the whole case, you know.
Well, let me ask you this. The sheriff of Carroll County. Now, wouldn't there have to be some kind of records that existed at the time to keep him? And I'm wondering how long, I mean, I expected that the court records would be on microfiche or something. But is there anybody else that might have something pertaining to this that would maybe add to the story that not that you missed, but that maybe wouldn't talk to you for whatever reason?
Right. Well, the court records themselves, I know that they really should never do something like this, but I know that the curator at the museum at the time, she had several times because she caught them throwing away records that were old. And then she would get those records and save them or whatever. She'd get them out of the dumpster where they had taken them and was saving them. So, you know, there's a possibility that some of them are in the museum archives. But since they were kicked out of the Carroll County Courthouse and they're moving to the building and they're having to remodel and everything's in really going to be a very long time. Any information, any documents that Charles Gerard had gotten, because he was the main person that would keep copies of documents, evidence in case anybody ever questioned our research or whatever. And then when he died, and we fought and got his archives donated to Delphi Preservation Society, and so they have whatever was not damaged in his house right now. But that's another place where who knows when this stuff is going to be accessible, because when you're going through thousands of documents, it's just not that easy.
You know, to answer that, I don't even know that they did mug shots back then, did they? In 1869?
That's what I'm wondering. You know, but then
I mean, who escaped? You know, and if they didn't they have a bullet in their ass? You know.
my great grandfather was coroner of Chilly County, and I can't find a picture of him, and he was a public official.
Hey, you know what? And that kind of brings up Buck Stanley. Now, he was very upset because he was the undersheriff of Cass County, I believe.
Right.
And he went down to Texas after some investigation, actually, to find out how the letters were going from his mom to Amer, and found out a general location of where they was being picked up. Went down on horseback from Cass County, Logansport, Indiana, obtained him and his brother, and brought them back, and was denied the reward money because he was law enforcement. He was very bitter about that. Correct.
Oh, yeah, he was very bitter about it. But, you know, of course, then he went in, he got famous, more or less, you know. But
Yeah, he did. And you know what? It does show kind of a sense of karma in a way. Because, I mean, with all due respect, even though he didn't get the money, I mean, he did get that.
Right. I mean, you know, he was a deputy sheriff. You know, if he wanted to go do it for a reward, he probably should have said, "Okay, I'm going to resign, sheriff," and went out and did it, and then came back with him and he said, "Okay, here I am, I want my job back." They were giving it back to him.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And you know, that was the downside of it. And you know what? I mean, I'm not trying to change this too, but on the flip side, I mean, if a person of interest is pointed at or pointed to by law enforcement, would they have any stake in the reward?
Supposedly, if you're law enforcement, you don't.
Well, I bring that up for the reason of the Delphi murders, the new ones, because, you know, the person that I feel it is was, of course, you know, called Carroll County because it was St. Louis Police Department. Well, there's a lot of reward money on that. And I told people nobody would get the reward money because, well, one, that guy was already in jail, for one, you know, and two, they gave the information that would lead to his, any filing should they occur. Right. So I felt that money, if that was the case, should be split between the county and the family, because that's like over $250,000. Now, it can't buy a kid back, but at the same time, you know, it just seems right rather than the FBI keeping the money.
Yeah, well, you know, I don't know how those things work, and really haven't stayed on the case because I just don't understand it too well.
Ms. Cavalier?
Well, now, if I understand correctly, Mr. Griffey, you went through all of this information that this gentleman brought to the newspaper to you. Is that right?
We got the information out of the newspapers originally. Then we started going around. We went to Texas. We followed the route that supposedly that Buck Stanley and the deputy sheriff took to go find and capture Amer. We went to where he supposedly captured Amer. It's now a boys' school, boys' ranch, which is really a very nice place. And because there were things in the newspaper which just made it sound A little bit too real at times. Like Buck Stanley was really this big, heavy hero and all this. I mean, uh, going and getting this big, terrible criminal in West Texas. But the thing is, compared to everybody else that was in West Texas at that time, Amer Green was nothing. Real Green was nothing. I mean, we're talking about Tascosa, Texas, where on a weekend night there were gunfights all over the place. I mean, they were nothing. Bill and Amer were nothing compared to what was around there. And supposedly they had the Cowboys, according to the paper, the Cowboys put up a monument to him or whatever after he was lynched. Yeah, there wasn't any record. I mean, I went through so many historical records in the Amarillo area and West Texas, Canyon State University, all this. That's where all the archives of all the newspapers are. No mention at all of being captured or anything else.
Well, things could be stretched rather easily back then.
It was not an event. By the time they got up to Indiana, of course, the newspaper editor of the Journal, he really made him a huge hero. And of course, he had a bit in it because the editor of the Delphi Journal, he became the U.S. congressman. I mean, this helped him become a U.S. congressman. I mean, he became famous after that, after the Amer Green story.
You know, it should have happened to Buck Stanley.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't a politician, I don't think. That was his problem.
But he could have became one.
Buck still became sheriff. But no, he, the editor of the Delphi Journal then became the U.S. congressman. So.
And what, when you were going through all these newspapers, old newspapers, were there any other cases that were half as interesting as this?
No, not in Carroll County.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, like this is
In Texas, well, there were a lot of stories about what was going on there, but none of them included Amer Green or Bill.
Now, I mean, I think at this time, I mean, it was multi-state news. I mean, like Chicago, Indianapolis, there was a lot of people that was really following this as it progressed.
Well, the Journal, the Delphi Journal, the editor of that was the one that was sending woodcuts and the news reports and everything else to New York, to Chicago, to Dallas, to everywhere. I mean, he was sending that news everywhere. That's what made him famous. I mean, that's why he was doing it. And then he would harass citizens over the fact that, he sold this many papers and this many card cuttings and all that, engravings and all that to newspapers around the U.S. And their promotion was still rotting in the sun or something. I mean, he really harassed the other one. For some reason,
well, I'd like to read, if it exists, the court record. That would be a good read.
Well, now you're sending me on an errand.
Well, I am,
but I would be very happy to do it, believe me, because it would be something that I think we would all want to know.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's like I said, that grand jury had to be the biggest joke in the history of Carroll County. It really did.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And when I read that, I thought every one of them are lying and all of them are getting by because they're all standing to the same side.
Right.
But you know what? I mean, the point is it is what it was. I mean, they got him, they lynched him, they broke the law. What else could they do except stand to the side of the lie? Because if somebody pointed at another, well, shit was hitting the fan.
Right. Yeah, but it was just too easy, you know. I mean, it was
Couldn't
too
do it
easy
today.
to say who was there. I mean, you know, and they weren't going to do it. They weren't going to turn on their friends and neighbors.
Well, Mr. Mabbott was there. You know?
That's what the article said. He was there, but
Yeah,
no, he wasn't there.
wrote
He
by
was
the
there, but
reporter who said he
there.
wasn't there.
Griffey, let me ask you this. How much do you think, after doing all the research on this case, did Mr. Mavick, how much influence did he have in driving this case and the whole 9 yards with bringing Amer Green to his point of justice?
Yeah, I think that Mr. Mabbott had almost 100% influence in it because he was a wealthy farmer, landowner in the county. He had influence. He had not influence not only in Carrollton Township, he had influence that went back to politics. And he lost it all. I mean, he lost it all. But yeah, he was responsible for all, you know, as far as anyway, I'm going to tell you a picture of that's the editor of the Delphi Journal that became a U.S. congressman. And it was, that's Charles B. Landis. And he was basically, he became famous because of the Amer Green case. And there was no way he was going to let it come out that Amer wasn't guilty.
Yeah, well, you know what? They made sure of that, didn't they?
Well, no, I mean, they just weren't going to let it end up him not being guilty because.
Well, no, what I mean is by lynching him, they made sure that he wasn't going to be found not guilty.
Right, but even after they lynched him, they were make sure that he wasn't found not guilty. Because even if they knew where that girl was, where that Luella Merritt was, and that Samuel Payne, even if they knew the murderers.
You froze up. Could you repeat that again?
And they were going to say, even if they located Luella Merritt, and she was Luella Mabbott, even if they located her, they would have never allowed it to be put out because then that made them murderers.
Right. Got you.
Now, did you ever, let me ask you this. I don't know what the status of the LDS church ancestry was at the time you researched this, but did you ever go to any of those organizations? Because and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but the Mormon Church has been researching ancestry for a very long time, and it's probably generations by now. Did you ever look for Samuel Payne?
Yes, I looked for it, but I didn't find past Fort Worth.
So it's only in Fort Worth then?
Fort Worth, and supposedly, according to neighbors, they went back to his home in Chicago.
Okay.
But I could never really find him in Chicago.
Yeah, and you know what? That's kind of what I was saying is that they found where the guy had lived down there, but they never did find him in Chicago.
Right. But according to some of the records, Amer had known this Samuel Payne when he lived in Indiana. And Samuel Payne was somebody he knew.
I see.
So you know, and then supposedly this Payne went to Texas.
May give good reason to go to Texas.
Right. But like I said, it's all supposition without, something to back it up.
That I didn't know, because I had read in a almost inaccurate newspaper report that Samuel Payne had a brother in the Chicago area, which had to be huge at that time, that worked in a butter factory, but his name was never shared publicly.
Right. But no, supposedly Amer and he were acquaintances before Amer went to Texas from Indiana.
Well, what was Amer Green's criminal record? Why did Mr. Mavick have a real averse position that his daughter wasn't going to get involved with Amer Green?
Amer was a petty thief. He went around and he stole. I mean, he was just a common thief. He wasn't. He didn't go out and probably rob banks or anything like that. But he liked to steal petty items and
buggy whips.
Supposedly when they went to his house after the lynching or whatever, and somebody moved in there, they went upstairs and there were gravestones in the attic. There were whips. There were all kinds of stuff up in the attic that he had stolen. So he was just a petty thief. But as far as a criminal record, I never saw a criminal record for him. So I don't know if I did a search of the name and all that for a criminal record, but I just never saw a criminal record for him. So, and they never mentioned anything in any of the stories about him having a record. So,
I never.
He was just a petty thief, and she her father considered him not good enough for her, basically.
So he just thought he wasn't good enough for his daughter.
Correct.
Now, Amer was a big guy for here. In fact, the paper called him Herculean, and if my memory serves.
Yeah, he was tall. He was He was over 6 feet tall, I think.
Yeah, and back then when people were this tall,
yeah. Yeah, he was.
But again, down in Texas, where everything's big and giantish,
right?
He wasn't all that. He didn't stack up.
He was keeping quiet down there. I mean, he was keeping quiet, and he wasn't making a scene. When they went down to find him, they said that the sheriff knew him. I mean, he didn't have a problem with him. He knew Bill. He liked Bill. I mean, so obviously they weren't in Texas.
Now, Bill, I think it was the one that he said, I knew you wasn't a cattle buyer.
Right.
When you came up acting like a cattle buyer, he's like, I didn't know who you were, but I knew you wasn't a cattle buyer.
Right. Yeah.
That's when I would have ran. You know?
Well, no, I mean, and he says the biggest insult was that he fixed their breakfast for them before they were. So,
Well, Mr. Griffey, it has been an honor to speak to you. And, although this is kind of frontier justice that we're talking about, this new set of murders that happened with the girls here will never be like that. It will always be remembered as a deep, dark tragedy. And I have no doubt that murderer will be found if he hasn't been already. And I believe that he'll be brought to a different kind of justice. And I hope the Carroll County prosecutor has the strength to ask for the death penalty, and it ends the same as Amer Green, but without the questions.
right.
And I want to say that it has been a joy researching and looking into your book. And like I said, I ordered it. It's on the way, and I'm going to read it.
I told you she was smart, did I not?
The thing is, it is addictive. It's an addictive case. Like I said, all we did was find a picture. But then the more we got involved in it, the more we had to know, the more, and it's like, it's one of those things that can really become addictive because you really want to know the answers.
Yeah. Cunningham's here.
Well, all right. Maybe Cunningham will call in with some questions.
Well, excuse me, it is Greeno's turn, and I got call in now, Greeno, ready to hit on the punchline. So,
all right. I'm sorry I took so much.
No, don't.
It's addictive.
I am delighted that you called because you have really helped with the questions and the show.
All right. Well, I'll be listening.
Okay, and I hope to hear from you later on.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good night. And there it is. Greeno, if you're out there, if you're near a phone, this is your time. This is when you make your call. Get in there. Get that phone ring. It's him. Oh, hey, hello. What's up, dude?
It's Anthony Greeno.
It's Greeno.
Hey, so I've got a ton of questions here. I've got some questions because when Michael first started telling me about this, it was very interesting because I thought, you know what? I said, man, I'm related to the Mabbits. I said they're from this whole general area, from south of Lafayette to Young America to Logansport, all over this general area. And I thought, well, what were the chances that they are the blood relatives of Luella? And so I told my great aunt about it, and she said, that's very interesting. I didn't know anything about this. I'd be interested in looking into it more. And I told her, I said, well, there's a lot of questions that are involved in this because, apparently the person that they had buried in Lafayette may not be the person, but since you are a Mabbit, would you be willing to do some sort of DNA test to find out if you are the blood relation to that body? And how would that go about? And she's like, I don't know how that would go about, but maybe you could answer how exactly they could get that process started. How would they go about submitting a DNA and getting that DNA tested with the body that's there in Lafayette?
I really don't know.
You know what? I kind of have an answer.
Okay.
If it was female and you could find a full female to female relative, you could check the mitochondrial DNA. Now, if there is a Mabbit with the Mabbit bloodline, then you could test that against the Mabbit traits in the DNA to test beyond reason that it was Mabbit blood, Mabbit DNA. That's just what I know concerning DNA, but the mitochondrial would be for female, whereas the other would follow the family traits.
Okay, so if they did the testing and found out that they are the descendants or relatives of that, then I mean, exhuming the body would be huge just to find out if it is the same, you know what I mean? If it is the woman, because I know there's a lot of question on is it or is it not. And Michael, Katt, and I went to that gravesite and was looking all around for it. And since I've been back looking, and we really couldn't actually find the exact spot, but we know the area of where it's at. And I'm fascinated by this because what if it proves that it's not her? Then it's like, okay, did an innocent man, was he hung? Was he innocent? Or did he actually commit the crime? I mean, what do you think, Mike, Mr. Griffey? Do you think that Amer Green is the person that committed this crime, or do you think that they may have hung an innocent man?
Personally, I lean toward the feeling that he helped her run away. That's what I believe, only because of all of the coincidences along the way. As far as the girl in Fort Worth, and I mean, there was just too many things that seemed right to me. But I understand that Mr. Mabbit was a very powerful man at that time, a big landowner, powerful, influential, and as far as he was concerned, even if he had just helped her run away, that was a capital offense as far as Daddy was concerned, I think.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and it's like that, back then, if you've got a lot of money like that and you're very influential, I mean, we see what happened. I mean, they broke into the jail and busted this guy out and took him and hung him. So I guess you don't get no more powerful than that to be able to influence a community or, over 250 people to go out there and do this. This is so strange because when he showed me that picture of him hanging there in that tree and said, dude, I know where this is. This is right here at this location. And we went there, and it was just that stone was placed there because the tree was gone. But just to be there and look at that and think, wow, man, this a long time ago, this happened right here. There was all these people standing here, and this guy was hung here. And this picture, we went and tried to take a picture in the same. We took it from multiple angles just to try to get those shots, to try to replicate what it looks like now. And it is so interesting. Yeah, and that picture right there.
That's the one.
Yeah, just to look at that and say, wow, I can't believe that we stood there and looked at that same area. Your story is so cool, and I'm so glad that you had brought that up, because when he found, I don't even know how did you find that, Katt?
You know what? My dad bought the book, and it was at some fest that was over in Delphi, and they had the book for sale there. And he bought it, and I read it, and I was very intrigued with it, so much so that I took it to work with me at Indiana Packers. And when I quit, I didn't clear out my locker, and that was the last place it was. Don't tell my dad, he'll skin my backside.
Okay, a question, just a question. Was the copy that you had, did it have the gold cover or a light green cover?
It was the gold cover.
Okay. Because I had, I think it was about 500 copies made with the green cover, and we gave a lot of them to the museum or for community organizations to sell, and they would get 100% of the proceeds. It was just like giving away to like the historical groups so that they could make some money off of them.
Yeah.
But the gold copies, that was what we did. We sold to make money.
Well, you know what? You made my dad's money, and you made my money.
Yeah. Well, you know, so wasn't okay. So there's not just one, but isn't there part two of a book? Isn't there a second book?
Yes.
Now, what does the second book go into?
The second book, the first book is purely the newspaper articles, our total newspaper articles. The second book is more of a storyline, which includes all the information found subsequently about Texas, wherever we went and tried to find further information after the book came out. And this one just includes more updated information, I guess. And it's not only solely the newspaper articles.
You know what? I do have a question. Now, William Walker, he's the one that shot Amos Brumball.
No, William Walker didn't.
But it was Amer's brother.
Amer's brother.
Yes. Okay.
Bill Green.
Yes. Okay.
And he was hunchback. He was a hunchback.
Yeah. In fact, they said that he was quite the opposite of Amer, whereas Amer was tall. He was very short, hunchback. They was kind of almost direct opposites physically.
Right. In the newspaper, they said it made him look like a joke, compared to the leftovers, I guess. Compared to Amer, the was perfect specimen, and Billy was nothing.
And Amos Brumball popped him right in the face. Now, you know what? Upon reading that, when I read it, I thought, you know what? He had every human right to shoot him when he came at him. And I never understood why that they held that on him. I really don't. Not unless Brumballs were a big family at that time.
Possible. It's possible.
Because it seemed to me he fired at his feet and he said, "Don't come near me." And the guy kept coming, popped him in the head, and there it was. And then they got him on it. And I'm like, man, that seems, even back in the day of common law, that should have been law. You know what? The guy had it coming.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said.
Oh, okay. I didn't do that. There we go. Hang on. There we go.
Okay.
Hang on. Yep. Now you're back.
Okay. So is he back?
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
You can hear okay, Mr. Griffey? Hang on. Can you hear all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I can. Well, I could a minute ago.
Here's a question. So what made them? So the remains were found in the Wabash River near Lafayette, or near the Wabash, whichever one it was. What made them point the connection to this may be Miss Mabbitt?
Only because that was the only reported missing person, I guess, at the time. And, I mean, you realize how far that body had to go from Middle Fork down the Wildcat and then all the way down to the Wabash and then into the Wabash. I mean, I don't know what the Wildcat looked like back then, but I mean, nowadays it would get hung up on something long before it got to Lafayette. But
Exactly. Yeah. Long. And you know what? It almost seems very, very, very unlikely that would even happen. That it would get that far away before someone would notice it.
Total agreement.
You know,
yeah.
Like if she was dumped in, taken somewhere and dumped in the Wabash, then it would make more sense. But it just seems too far of a stretch from, in the way that they were traveling back then by horseback and carriage. It just seems way too improbable that was the exact same person. So it's like they built that case on pure speculation, just guessing. Well, you know what? There's a body. We're going to pin it on this guy.
Well, and I mean, I kind of take that aside because the doctors were quick to say, yes, that's her.
Very good. And it was a skeleton. It was a skeletal remains. But, no, the thing is that when I've mentioned before that Mr. Mabbitt didn't even believe it was his daughter, if William Mabbitt had believed that was his daughter, don't you think he would have had that body buried in Sharon, Indiana, in their lots, rather than to be left in Lafayette, Indiana?
Yeah, you know what? I do. And Sharon's right up the road. In fact, you've been with me too there, hadn't you, Greeno, to that cemetery?
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, we both been there, and we kind of did our due diligence on this. We went and filmed the area where he was hung, and there's like a big pink type rock that's like down in the ground right there where that tree was. Now, I remember, this is back when my dad bought that house in 1986, that there was a old rotten tree stump there, and I don't know whether that was the tree or not. In fact, very hard to tell, but it was in the same similar type position as to where the stone is.
Yeah, probably not the same tree because they said that it died because of people cutting samples out of it. I mean, pieces of the tree.
See that, you can see how people would do that. They take the rope, they take the tree, they take the picture, and they say, "Hey, put his hat on it, and let me put my cat under there, man."
Yeah.
I want my cat in it.
Evidence that any of that stuff still exists within anybody? Have you ever been able to find that anything like that exists? Piece of rope, piece of clothes, anything?
There was a piece of rope in the museum. I don't know if it still is, or I don't know if somebody thought that was too macabre and got rid of it. I don't know,
Shame. You know what? Because that would have to be saved.
Yeah.
That is history.
I know that there was at one time a piece of the rope there.
It would be real interesting just to see that.
Yeah, it would. In fact, you know what? I will get over there in due time. It might take a while, but I'll get to Delphi, man, and I'll spend like probably a week or two going through records. But you know what? If I find anything, it's probably going to be something that you found ever ago.
Yeah. Well, I don't. Like I said, records. It would be nice to see the actual records and compare them to what supposedly went on in the grand jury and all that. I mean, because the newspaper, he did like a verbatim story of what went on, but you don't know how much he left in or took out or anything else. He was looking at it from.
You froze up there, Mr. Griffey. If you could repeat that last statement.
Okay, I said that he was. It would be nice to compare what the journal said happened to the grand jury and what the court record says happened to the grand jury, because the editor journal, he was working toward his career advancement. He wasn't necessarily looking at what was exactly happening.
Right. Now, what about, wasn't there a news article, and I think it may have been in Lafayette, I think, don't quote me on that, but it was one of the news articles where it was said that one of the newspapers reported that he was standing up there with he was standing on a carriage or something like that, and the horses got spooked and took off, and he was accidentally hung. Wasn't there an article on that?
Well, it was while he was actually talking that the horses, took off, and then he was hung before he could finish saying whatever he was saying at the moment.
The last words choked off, you know.
Yeah, it's like, what was he going to say next?
Yeah.
You know?
And
Well, you know what? They had the reporter right there to write it down. But now, of course, he says he wasn't, but
Yeah, he just ends it with ...
yeah.
You know? ...
Lynching occurred.
To be determined. Speculate what he could have said. You know, it's like a new promo. You know, find out what he may have said.
Oh yeah, make it tabloid. Go ahead. You know, National Enquirer.
What he didn't say.
Married on the side of here in Ohio, and here in Ohio, they asked at Hebron, Ohio, and he said yes, and that's when the horses gave birth and he was suspended.
Could you repeat that? You broke up again.
Okay, his final words were yes, and that's when the horses lurched and was done.
Man, Smart Money says somebody smacked that horse on the ass. You know?
The horses lurched forward.
Yeah, horses don't just lurch forward unless they're informed to. Like, hey, man, we came here for a reason. Let's get on with it.
Yeah, he's about to say too much.
Yeah.
You know, he's about to reveal she's alive. We can't have that. We just broke him out of jail. We're all going to go to jail now. You know.
Well, you know what, though? Yeah, but I mean, I think that was the whole of it. I mean, Mr. Mabbitt wanted to know, where's my daughter? And it would seem counterproductive to kill him if he's actually talking. But, you know, God only knows today what occurred, you know, to cause the horses to lurch.
Right.
Right. Now, so nobody was ever held accountable for breaking him out, hanging him. They just kind of left it as is.
They all lied, dude.
Oh,
But I mean, like at the time, like, okay, so the sheriff knew who did it. They all knew what happened. But I mean, after it was said and done, everybody just kind of said, well, there it is. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, they was taken to court on it, wasn't they?
No, they had the grand jury. Everybody denied anything happened. They didn't know anybody was there and all that. Even though in the newspaper he had written down who was there.
Yeah, including Mr. Mabbitt. Amer Green says it's Mr. Mabbitt here. Yeah, bring Mr. Mabbitt forward. Yeah. You know, but I mean, like all of them was like, yeah, I wasn't there, man. I couldn't tell you. I was home. I was home drinking a bottle of wine with the old lady. You know.
Yeah, kind of like just everybody denied being there.
They did, man. I mean, right? I mean that's the way it went. Everybody's like, yeah, I wasn't there, man. And now did they not talk to the newspaper reporter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He also denied that he knew anybody there.
But he was there.
I mean, he wrote in the paper that Mr. Green was there, or Mr. Mabbitt was there.
Yeah.
But yet, when he went into court under oath, he didn't know anybody that was there.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. See,
I mean, the days of justice, man.
It's not that easy anymore.
No, today they'll just nail you, man. They don't care. We heard you was there.
We heard you were there. You were there. Yeah, exactly. Well, you know what, man? I'll let some other people call, but you know, I wanted to say it was great to actually talk to you, Mr. Griffey. You know, after this is a very interesting story, and I'm interested to know more. And I've been talking to my family about it. You know, well, I talked to them mainly when I first heard about it, but they were definitely interested in it. And I had forwarded them the link, you know, and told them about the book. And I said, you really need to read this because, you know, this is like potentially involving the family, and this is old history that's unsolved in a way, but there's questions out there that maybe you guys could help find some answers to. And I think that they're more than willing to do anything. We really don't know how to go about it. And it's awesome that you brought this forward, because when Michael first told me about it, I was just in shock that the names, just the name Mabbitt and the story behind this, and the fact that it happened right here in Carroll County.
You know what? If I may take that a step forward, when you left that day, did not one of them come and pick you up?
Yeah, my cousin Keith. Yeah, so it's his mom is my great aunt. That was, he actually came and picked me up. That was crazy that day. So I was telling him about it, and he seemed somewhat interested in it, but I don't think he understood the nature of what I was talking about, because I didn't have the picture or anything to show him. But I did show my aunt, and she was like, "Wow, that's I never even heard about that before." So if it does come to light that they are the blood relatives, the direct descendants, or somewhat related, which I find it hard to believe that they may not be, because they've been here their whole lives and farmers. It would be interesting to try to find some sort of resolution as to who that body is in Lafayette.
Yeah. Well, whether or not it's her, for sure.
I'll say that one more time.
Whether or not it's her, for sure.
Yeah, and that's really the key here, is whether or not it's her. Because if it isn't, then it opens up a whole array of new questions. Well, then who was it?
Exactly. Unsolved. That's my middle name.
And it's like it's going to be unsolved forever unless something happens, unless that body's exhumed and people find out who that is.
In fact, I'm a private investigator.
Find that out.
Yeah, it would, because if it is unsolved, there is no way to solve it. There really is no way today.
Yeah. What was that badge?
That was the private investigator badge.
Oh, cool, dude. That's cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, cool.
You know what? I was trying to be like Greeno.
Yeah.
Look at me. Look at me. You know what? If somebody else wants to get a call in here real quick, if you were saying goodbye, I didn't know if you were or not.
Yep, I'm saying goodbye. I just wanted to say much respect to you, Mr. Griffey, and it's awesome that what you're doing. And I really hope that we do find some resolution. I'll keep in touch with you and Michael, and maybe we can figure out something with the family to get something done about this and find out some more answers.
Okay, thank you, Anthony.
That would be top notch. All right, man. Thanks for calling, Greeno.
All right, have a good night, guys.
Peace. All right. Well, we got 2 minutes. If somebody's got a quick question, I kind of wanted to wrap this up in 2 hours. I didn't want to keep Mr. Griffey all evening. Uh-oh. Well, you know what? You got 2 minutes there, Mike. I hope that soon is very quick. It's like oh, hey, that might be him. Hello? What's up?
How you doing, Mr. Griffey and Mike?
I'm doing well.
Okay.
Right now I'm going to be sending you some links that I came across that comes in to this. It gets very detailed about the Amer Green. I call lynching. To me, I think he got murdered. And my question for him is, did Mr. Michael know about his brother being pardoned by the governor?
About what? About the pardon?
You're breaking up, Mr. Griffey. Hang on.
What was the question?
I was asking, has anybody in your family told you about William Green being later on pardoned by the governor because of his whatever situation it was?
Okay, really hadn't followed up that one because that was not my interest. I mean, I know that he got out of prison, so since he had been in there for murder, it would appear that he was either paroled or whatever. But I didn't know that he had been pardoned.
I'm gonna try to send the link to Mike on it because it actually reversed the names on there. They try to indicate that Amer Green was the one that got pardoned and William was the one that got hung.
No.
No,
That's not accurate.
No, that mistake. That's like Facebook there, man.
Made the mistake.
Well, you know what? In an article that
mistake.
that Miss Cavalier wrote me earlier, in that article they called him Abner Green.
Yeah, I seen that too.
And that wasn't his name, and that's also the name they buried him under. In fact, hang on a second, I will show you the other picture of the stone.
It might be the article that I'm looking at too, but I also found the New York Times that actually covered this. I don't have the money to subscribe to it, but they actually have the full article of that day of October 25th, 1887.
1887?
Yes.
Well,
No, they were
in 1869.
Well, I don't know what they were doing on this article on it, but it apparently has was she Lulu mapping. That's what the article title is.
Huh.
Luella.
I'm about to send it to you and how you want to go about it.
Okay.
If there's anything else I can cross-reference and find while I'm Googling, I'll send it.
You know what? Anything you find, please send.
Yeah. Well, it's also that on Ancestry, they have a lot of messages going on that board.
All right.
Under about Lulu, or I might be saying her name wrong.
It was Luella, but probably Lulu pet name.
But they spelled it wrong under the Ancestry thing. They spelled it with Lulla, Mabbit murder, and they still had the wrong year for it.
Yeah, people. Go ahead, Mr. Griffey.
Yeah, just for research. Somebody didn't do the job to find out what was really going on, I guess.
I'm trying my hardest to hear him.
Well, yeah, it's he's calling from Central America.
Oh, okay.
And
that's understandable.
Got a little slower, but hey, Mr. Griffey, at some time when you're back in Delphi, would it be good to pick the show back up at that time?
Possibility right there.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you to talk with you. I don't want to make this longer than what it is anyways myself.
Okay, well, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
All right, you have a good evening, Mike. Bye.
Cunningham is a good name because that's my mother's maiden name. So.
Ah, yeah. Okay. You know what? Maybe you guys share a relative, you know?
He's from the Cutler area, most likely.
and Greeno's related to the Mabbits, and you know what? I have no green in me.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. I appreciate you being here, man. I'm really honored that you took the time, and it's my hope that one time when you're back in Delphi, we can get a better connection and probably pick this show back up and maybe get some more information, because I'm going to keep looking. I'll dig where I can, see what I can find, and maybe we could go over that.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, you have a good evening, Mr. Griffey, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, you too. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye. All right, everyone. That concludes the show. Oh wait, you're back on. Man, I killed everything and you're still here. Okay, man. All right. So anyway, I'm wrapping this up, and I will probably talk at everybody. I'm still making that video, so it might be out before next Tuesday. But if not, or wait, you know what? I do have something coming. In fact, I'm going to have my standard show that I normally do. I will have that Thursday, the 20th, at 6 p.m. And because that we didn't cover my normal show, because the special guest. So I will cover that at that time. So until then, everybody, I want to thank everybody for being here and viewing, my mods and Michael Griffey. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.